Hey all, welcome back to Tallulah Talks. That is me, and today is Saturday, which means it is time for Saturday's Haunting Hour. And it's October, so that's why it's kind of good to have these videos. So today we are going to talk about the haunting that took place at Amityville. Now, a lot of people will know the name Amityville. I think there was a movie made back in the 70s or 80s regarding what had happened, but then there was a more recent movie that came out, I think, in 2005 with Ryan Reynolds called The Amityville Horror. And basically what had happened was there was a family, the Defeos, who had moved into the house, and one of the Defeo family members murdered their whole family. After this, the Lutzes then bought the home, and they were experiencing a lot of spiritual activity. And I'm not sure how long they live in the house in the movie, but in real life, the Lutzes only stay in the house for 28 days, and they never return to it. Full stop. They flee the home. They left everything behind. So those are the two families we are going to be talking about today: the Defeos and the Lutzes. And it kind of does jump back and forth, and I'll try and do my best to make it as simple as possible. Book of stories right here. I'm going to hold it up so I can just continue looking at the camera and I'm not looking down all the time. But yeah, so the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, were involved in this case. If you don't know who the Warrens are, they were very prominent in the 60s, 70s and 80s. They were known for paranormal investigations, and they did, like the Annabelle case and part of the Conjuring universe. So this is also what they were heavily involved in. So to start off, they were not called by the Lutz family. They were actually called in by Marvin Scott, who was with Channel 5 News. And they were doing a newsreel or whatever on the house because of what happened in the house previously. And I think they entered the house, and it was pretty intense. They said that they were terrified of being in that house, basically. So like I said, him and his crew were quite heavily involved with the Warrens in this investigation. They called the Warrens up to investigate the haunting. However, it was unknown to the Warrens that previously the Defeo family had been murdered in that home. So going back to the Defeo family, like I said, it is a bit jumpy, but I'll try and keep it as simple as possible. So the head of the household, Mr. Defeo, travelled to Montreal to visit a shrine where miracles were said to have taken place. This is because of what was happening in the house, which I will get into later. It was said that from this place he then brought back a priest who was also an exorcist, and said that there were these spirits in the house, and he needed a priest to basically perform an exorcism and get rid of what they called masses or shadows. The priest did perform some exorcisms. However, this didn't seem to work, and during this, candles would blow out, doors would open and close, and footsteps could actually be heard as well. So it kind of seems it's quite a strong force that is within that house. At this time, Ronald Defeo, who was actually the murderer of his family, fled the home when the priest was there. He did not want to be around the priest. He then unfortunately murdered his family on November 13th of 1974 at 3:15 a.m. with a high-powered rifle. He also says later on that he doesn't actually remember committing the murders, but he does remember a shadow goading him on and possibly taking possession of his body. One of the priests who had performed the exorcism at the house then went on to tell the Warrens, when they were involved, what he experienced. So back to Marvin Scott. So he was the Channel 5 news anchor, And he told their Warrens that there had unfortunately been a tragedy within the home. He then told the Warrens that the Lutzes, who were the family who were currently living there, had fled, leaving behind all their possessions. And I mean everything. Like, they did not even pack a bag. They left clothes, they left toothbrushes, they left furniture, family photos. They left everything. Like, they literally fled that house with nothing on their backs. And that kind of just goes to show how terrified they must have been. The Warrens then told Marvin that in order for them to come and investigate this house, they would need an invite and permission from the Lutz family. So then a meeting was set up with George Lutz, the head of the family, but he refused point blank to go back to that house. They met at a pizza parlour, and he talked with the Warrens, who noticed that he was absolutely terrified. And George was actually described as a man who, I don't think he believed in God. He wasn't religious at all. He was like a very, you know, if I can see it, I can fight it sort of thing. He did not believe in the spirits or entities or anything like that. He was an ex-Marine. And like I've just said, after 28 days, him and his family fled and ran to California. Lorraine described the home when they had eventually got there as being very beautiful. And she described George as enjoying being in control, but not in like a negative way. Probably in a way that when this type of thing happens, and because he can't control it, he didn't like that. And obviously he wanted to keep his family safe. During his time in the home, Lutz would command whatever was haunting the home to come out and fight him. And when it first began, George actually found it very difficult to even believe in God, let alone spirits, which is what I just said. And the Warrens stated that this case actually interfered with their own personal lives as well. So after the first day of investigating the home, the spirits within the house were said to actually follow the Warrens back to their home. That night, Lorraine contacted priests because she was extremely afraid, and I don't know if she experienced anything, but she said she could feel like a dark presence. She called specifically on priest Padre Pio to help with Amityville, because he was a specific type of priest where he would take on the physical fights, I guess, of spirits. So he actually has marks on his bodies from performing certain exorcisms. When asking George why he was so afraid, he point blank refused to say what had frightened him, because he didn't actually understand himself what had happened in that home, and that must have been absolutely terrifying. I believe in spirits, I also believe in God and everything like that. And I can tell you that if half the things happened to me that they did in this house, like, no. He was also afraid to speak of it in case it happened again, because previously they had told his mother-in-law what had been happening, and at that point it is said that him and his wife actually levitated a few feet from the ground, and this terrified them. I mean, it would terrify anyone, right? Back at the property, so at the back of the Amityville home, there was a boathouse and the Amityville River surrounding that. So yes, at the back of the property there was a like boathouse part, and it was said that this is previously where Shinnecock Indians had an enclosure where they put the sick and dying. So this was obviously well before the home was built. And it was said that demonic or malevolent spirits are actually drawn to this sort of energy. And then later on, the statue of John Ketchum, I'm not sure who he was, but a statue of him was built for whatever reason, but he had also been the man who built a cottage where the current House of Amityville stands. He wanted to be buried on that land. However, it was said that he was excommunicated from his community in Salem for practicing witchcraft. And again, this could have been the reason why so many spirits are attached to Amityville. The actual home itself was built in 1928, and every family who had lived there had never had a happy time, and I don't think they lived there for very long either. After involving the priests, the Defeos, who had lived there previously before the Lutzes, had covered their house with blessed statues because they believed it would help them. Unfortunately, it didn't. Marvin Scott, the anchorman with Channel 5 News, and his camera crew filmed inside the house and were actually very badly affected by this. I don't think they went back in the house. I think some of them got quite sick as well. And when the Warrens first entered the house, Ed used religious provocation, which he did quite a lot in these investigations, commanding the spirit to reveal its identity. Ed then felt this pressure began pushing on him, and it said that he could feel like pinpoints of electricity hitting his body. He commanded again for the spirit to leave the home in the name of Jesus Christ, and immediately this pressure that he had felt lifted. During the investigation, the Warrens would kind of separate, so Lorraine would go and try and maybe connect what was ever in the house, and Ed, I'm not sure what Ed did. I know that he was a demonologist, but anyway, they went their separate ways, and Lorraine just immediately got this feeling of dread. And as she was walking up the stairs, she stopped on the landing and held very tightly onto a relic and prayed for strength, and then this dark feeling all of a sudden lifted. So it did obviously have a reaction to these religious items and religious words being spoken. However, it did not get rid of these spirits. In a room where the priest, so one of the priests who were involved, had heard a voice telling him to get out. And moving on to the Lutzes, it said that the couple's bed had levitated 2 feet from the ceiling, and then when they kind of looked to each other and said, like, is this really happening, the bed just immediately like fell and crashed to the floor. Like that, oh my god, that alone would make me flee the house. Like I said, when they fled, they left absolutely everything behind. There was also a room in the house which they nicknamed the Red Room, and it was believed to have been a place where one of the Defeos had practiced some kind of witchcraft. I'm pretty sure it was Robert Defeo. And I did say earlier that the guy who had built the cottage, he did actually practice witchcraft as well, which a lot of malicious spirits are drawn to. So they had found some witchcraft items that were still in the house, and like I said, they were known to be involved in the Amityville murders. Ronald Defeo was possibly possessed by whatever was in the house, and had this really bad hatred for his dad, but he loved the rest of his family. Upon questioning, he described a dark entity that had basically goaded him into committing these murders, but it wasn't just like, it was over time. It wasn't just like this one day, it was over time. Once the Lutzes moved in, there was this ceramic lion that Kathy Lutz had given to George as a gift. One night at 3:15 a.m, both of the couple heard the sound of like a marching band downstairs, and then they felt a very heavy weight on their legs. George turned on the light and saw that it was the ceramic lion just sitting on their legs. There was another instance where George was going downstairs to investigate what the marching band sound was, and as he was going down, he felt like a very sharp scratch on his left ankle, and he looked down and he was bleeding, and the ceramic lion was just a few inches from his feet. As he came to the bottom of the stairs, the marching band music stopped, and he found that the furniture had been moved back, like right back against the wall to like kind of like make space for the marching band, and the carpet was rolled up. None of the couple had done this. No like member of the family had done this. Cameraman, scientists and other psychics had entered the home, but point blank refused to go back once they had left. They all had really bad experiences. So much so that one of the psychics, like this was her job, she quit her job that day because of how terrified she was. One of the priests who had previously visited the home had paranormal experiences in his own home. So again, it's like the spirits had followed him. And his room at the rectory became ice cold, and he heard like a growling voice. He also described seeing a lizard-like creature, and this, when he was telling this to the wards, they could see the terror in his eyes. And Ed, as a demonologist, said that this was quite common for these spirits to represent themselves as something else. The Warrens also had experiences in their own home. At 3 a.m, Ed heard the door to his occult museum open. And from the movies and research, I believe that door was always locked, because obviously they had a young girl in the house. He heard footsteps, but originally he thought it was Lorraine. And then all of a sudden there was like, he felt wind and saw a dark mass, which he described as a shadow ghost. He knew what it was immediately from a very pungent smell, and stepped into the doorway holding a crucifix, and the spirit came right up to him within a few feet. He then commanded the spirit to leave. The spirit then, it was kind of like the spirit was mocking him, like it backed off but then came back around and came back at him. It was at this point he took holy water and sprinkled it, making the activity stop. So moving on to nowadays, the home was actually purchased by an anonymous buyer. I am not sure who it is. I don't know if the activity still happens. But that is the story of the Amityville home. Yeah, it seems very terrifying, and I mean, no wonder the family fled after 28 days. I'm pretty sure no one has lived in that house any longer than like 2 or 3 years, which just goes to show something must be going on. So yeah, so that is me done for today. And if you have any investigations you would like me to look into, definitely leave me a comment. And if this is the kind of content you enjoy, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you Wednesday for Killer Wednesday.